Rani Sanje Cheda Tsuji Chana Chanju Badu Dani Jaso Che Davi Chujin Jive Sona Dola Penji Sanje Druva Jo Sanje Cheda Tsuji Chana La Badu Dani Jaso Che Davi Chujin Jive Sona Dola Penji Sanje Druva Jo Sanje Cheda Tsuji Chana La Chanju Badu Dani Suji Dagi Chijin Jive Sona Ye Dola Be Chanje Druva Jola Dana Membeda Miyoji Omboda Jejena Suchi Chola Choba Chabana Sanje Shambara Duji Jive Jiru Teda Chichi Dumbe Chini Dini Deji 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 Indi Jabata La Chotocha Jinya Guva Yendi La Bini Jeshenta Sunja Yemeda Ampetani Levatu La Tumbe Sunyi Namu La Yekatan Ludan Nijaga Chubunda Dami Yekanam Dangandro Kunjetana Chizamba Tamja Kadu Takuchi Tando Kangi Denjen Chavacho Kapa Meba Jimeba Cheva Meba Tang Meba Hong Meba Chumeba Tade Me Denji Me Chuvani Chichi Tempa Sovi Sanja Manai Samba de la cha cha lo se o kaze de na o ya toni ji ju wa yin ba ye se me ju dan jie la jin wen na yang da ba ni do ba ka tin ni den ba ma de song天来yang la ju ni qin o yang da tu rong jin wo dong ba te xie ma ri mi xuan wa 마리 가봐 좋아하네. 딘다 두저를 아까게 전에 송하나시 다 가르래서나디 두단제라 경원은 두제라 지위 오원남 다 양다와 또봐 서원에 아니 라신지 초바라wan도 초와 집에 좀바디 그와 된텐다와 대다 말이 버레스 다 가상아마 권수 하나시 두단제라 경원 양다 판에 또봐 간 테니 땜배 말이 숭 오다 말이 봐요서나 아니 뭐니가 말이 배워한게 아니 레사네 아니 내디 파자 남시 지근도 그거니 아니 파자 남시 그든도 그와라 아니 제바 세바다 렘버기 쇠람네 아니 가소래 제와 다 가성하고 시원한 세제 아니 내년에 제와 초네 아니 다 제가 나시를 써요 동화 빠져네 빠져요 영화제 다 도스마 연구하래 되요 인다마다 번에 또마가 되네 때문에 말했어 대라야라 중이 총 서야라 중이 마다 오도세 펜지旁边 펜지 주당 아니 두지가 주당旁边 주당 아니 좀 제가 이 세세 오도세 용어래 근데 양다 통진 오도바 아니 대신 말이 무슨 와 그래 양다바 통와 그래가 아니 사모니 도바 양다바데 아니 최남지 내로 양다바 통와 아나 좀 오도바 세와네 아니 대바 주요 오도바 어 대바 주요 오도바지 시외 아니 대신 말이 무슨 와 아니 다뭐 도바니 대라 팜 아니 도바니라 대라 바발라 테나 도바니라 메바케 아니 시네 아니 테라 테나 도바니라 메베 상동 어 테니 도바니라 메베 아니 도바니 무슨 데베 이시 어 다테다른 마신도 아니 도바니 베제데 아니 도니 공심도 도로 콤발라 테네 아니 다 콜라 초와토와데 에투 승고에 버타 뭐야
So, here to begin with, there is a verse which says, loosely translating, that things that are based upon causes and conditions, due to our ignorance, we grasp at them as though they had some kind of intrinsic or true existence. But if you are able to stop that ignorance, if we have this grasping at things as having some kind of intrinsic intrinsic existence, then that leads into the 12 branches of dependent origination. From having that ignorance, we then give rise to various afflictive emotions, engage in karmas that then place an imprint on our mental continuum, and we have to experience the results of those karma. We have to go and take a rebirth, and we take on these contaminated aggregates that are then the basis for all of our suffering. We have craving and grasping in this cycle of continued existence. So the Buddha has taught that if we have this misapprehension, this grasping at things as though they had some kind of real or intrinsic existence, then all of the branches of dependent origination will arise from that. But if you are able to see correctly the actual way that things are, if you're able to see that they don't have that kind of intrinsic nature or intrinsic establishment, that they're not really truly existent, then one is able to remove this root of samsara, to get rid of that ignorance and all of the branches of dependent origination that come from that. So we have to then first, in order to correctly see the way that things actually are, we first have to determine the meaning of emptiness, come to a kind of resolution about what emptiness means, and then having achieved a kind of conceptual understanding of emptiness and having established or gotten to the point where one has achieved calm abiding, then one conjoins that calm abiding with special insight and brings forth a direct realization of emptiness. And then by habituating one's mind, strengthening that direct realization of emptiness, eventually one is able to completely get rid of all of the sort of traces of the root of samsara and get out completely of this cycle of samsara. So it is only by this wisdom realizing emptiness that we are able to get out of this cycle of taking rebirth within samsara.
Oh yeah, that day in down, that day Karsore, Lamjo Namsuganane, Anita, on a June chance and Yanda Betawa Sumshakinana, a June chance and Yanda Betawa Suganane, and it's subject Taboni Chinsani, Yanda Betawa Telaya, and Shabatella, and the Tower Congo with Junzen said, Tower Congo with Junzen. What I know to be shared Midana, Nation charges them like Comcheja, and the Sibits are what job mini by Teach it and to be Talape, said Takazan Jackie, or Castle. Tony Toko, and I got our Soko with that to see him by it. That Delama and the Castle. Tausi, and it's about Jisaboka, Kitama, Judamabochi, Shani, Takazan, Dilma, Chekala, or Tana Koala, Tabala, and Damito Bishara Medame by him, Tejiba, Mejaba, Ije, a ditchinsa in better. Oh, then a children. Data Tausi Ime Gugures, then Anita Kadresana, Jumden Deji, Ane Casore, Chani, Chandang within you day, Anita Yabuchores, Jumden Deji Katamje, Ane Jumden de la Kua Jinzen to Chene, Ane Jumden Deji Katamjang to Domeoba, Ane Jumden Deji Kala, Ane Ragatache Chene. Oh, Castle, Samasum never merged in Sona, and a June Jumden de Yacadi, and a Ranganam Namlishan. Sama Senji never younger, and I know Constitution to Changoa. Oh, Casanda, Chitanga Yitan, Odini, Tadu Gutan, 10 hours. Dombanita, Chandini turned the tattoo good turn a million while a chebe, which I compassion to Chango, but some of them never enough. Tangaji Dotian, and it died to Kazashuana, she turned on the monk with the dangers over China Tempati, waiting to Dodan. Kundu the monk with the dangers over China Tempati, and Chandin Doce. Oh, Georgia Kundu Dembadan turned on the Bany Woody, waiting down, and a Chandela. Oh.
So here then in the text, we are going through these three principal aspects of the path, renunciation, bodhicitta, and the correct view, the wisdom realizing emptiness. So we've gotten through the first two of these, renunciation and bodhicitta, and we've arrived at the first point within the 5 points dealing with the correct view, which is explaining why one needs to meditate on the correct view. So here, the reason that we need this is presented in the 9th verse here, where it says, "You may master renunciation and bodhicitta, but unless you have the wisdom perceiving reality, you cannot cut the root of cyclic life, make efforts in ways then to perceive interdependence." So in order to be able to get out of this cycle, we have to have method and wisdom conjoined together, a sort of special method in that it's endowed with wisdom and wisdom endowed with method. So here we had arrived at the point in the text where it was talking about the importance of understanding the scriptures. So here the Buddha has said that we should not accept his teachings just out of respect for him, but rather we should rely upon our own reasoning to investigate and analyze those scriptures. And we need to be able to distinguish between those which are requiring interpretation and those which we can say are definitive. So here in the text that we have, I would replace figurative and literal with requiring interpretation and something that is definitive. So here we just draw the distinction between something definitive and something that requires interpretation as follows. Something is definitive when its nature actually lies in the ultimate. So when the main subject matter is the ultimate, those scriptures that then are so definitive scriptures are then those that deal chiefly with the ultimate truth, and those which require interpretation is something where the scripture's main subject matter is not the ultimate truth. So figurative, as it says here, I'm going to translate as requiring interpretation, is something that, when its nature does not rely in the ultimate. So we have to come to an understanding of this via our own valid cognition. If something is contradicted by a valid cognition, then we can't accept it as is. So here, the main point is that one has to distinguish between definitive and those scriptures which are definitive and those which require interpretation. And here, the main distinction being drawn is the definitive deal mainly with the ultimate truth, and those which deal with the conventional truth or conventionalities require interpretation.
오야 텐데 인상 나좀된 대기 강송바데 아니 두시 삼바다 툼바 송고 인자 두자랑아랑게 아니 가서래 로저다 잡아 송고 인자 never 소소라 맨데와데 아니 멤버가 라왕게 매바 매 야보 코랑 나자들 팬 멤버가 라왕게 왕게 매 야보치 아니 never 때나 메르바 never tell them many men they were and never korang netang nekin or netang doing the one korang doing the any man they go on nasi. 좀 된데 이 최순바 대야 최사모데 토만에 숨바 마이바 두제랑아랑게 아니 로제다 숨 땜바 송고와 인장 단데디나라 레션이베나라 들송아 내가 소소라 맨데와랑 대와네 멤버라 왕게 마인 바타라서 두지 삼바다 되나 송고래 전에 송아나 시인자 좀 된데 최수 숨바 나야가 두자 코랑게 로제다 탐바 아니 다 송고와 인장 아니 수에 되라 수럽지 공부해야 점된지 공부 많이 봐. 점된지 공부해야 수럽 아니 수럽 그 공부 많이 봐. 다 들을 마음 연구하래.
So the Buddha taught in accordance with the dispositions of various disciples. So it's sort of like akin to a person who is sick. Although a medicine might be powerful and effective, one needs to take the right medicine in accordance with the kind of illness that one has. So in order to actually treat a person, you need to give them something that is going to treat their particular illness. And similarly with teachings, one needs to give a teaching that accords with the disposition of various disciples. So the Buddha didn't teach the profound emptiness immediately to certain disciples. Rather, he looked at their intelligence, their capabilities, and taught in a way that was able to be in accordance with their needs. So as it says in Gelama Tsongkhapa's Lekshin Yingpo, he has a verse dealing with this where he says that medicine is given in accordance with what ails a person. And so similarly, teachings are given in accordance with the disposition of disciples, such that we can't always say that the scriptures express literally or express the intent of the Buddha. We have to understand that the intent is to teach as beings need. And so it's not always that we can just look at the words in the scripture and say this is the exact intent of the Buddha.
안 다대와 다 치다보 이게 치모 로조와 지신상제 두제라 치삼체비 최된도 세 다대와 다 치다보 세가 이게 로비가라 통마네 아니 이게 배 ABCD 가가 강아서 말로 마도 탐번에 이게 배 렘로미도 나시체네 다대와다 치다보 이게 치모 로조바 배태거네 지신상제 두제라 상계 그지 두자랑 다 주시와 나서 치선서바 그 최대 말에 다려와다 치다 뭐 이게 치모로 저와 지조선 치다고 다들 가려선 거 아래에서나 아니 다 배나 콜 좀 낸데 송대라 콜로 받았음 콜로 봐봐 아니 콜로 담마 콜로 담보스 아니 콜로 담빈 내가서 아니 치된 여봤다네 가지라니 이덴바스 시로텐도 수다 수즈마 자신도 된바다 가지라니 이메데스 가라 아니 콜로 잡이 가서 치된 여봤어 와다 얼로 콜로 담만 도저 간데 가서 아니 치된 까바다 대신도 콜로 판단이 가나서 친한 거 쳐나 라고 천이지 좋았어 바다 어느 콜로 봐봐 아니 어차피 비청고지 가서 아니 쳐도 저랑 그 천이지 매발라서 숨발라서 와게와 사모 구직쟁지 봐 돈이 뭐 돈이 뭐 창주도 봐 가지라 오잖아 오다 리시로저다 틈바 아니 믿음 받는데 소용이 말해
So, as it says in Nagarjuna's Precious Garland, he has a verse where he explains how one needs to receive teachings in accordance with one's abilities. So, in just the same way that we have to first learn the alphabet in order to be able to read and then proceed to other topics, we first have to be taught in accordance with where we are at, where our mind and what our disposition is. So, in the same way that someone needs to learn the letters, to learn their ABCs before they are then able to proceed to reading and to other things, then someone similarly needs to be led properly by the teachings of the Buddha. They can't jump to something that they are unable to understand. So the various turnings of the wheel of Dharma that the Buddha did were to teach to the particular needs of disciples. So there is the first turning of the wheel where objects are presented as being truly established. Inner and outer phenomena are presented as being truly, really established. And then there is the second turning of the wheel that contain the Perfection of Wisdom sutras and so forth, where it is taught that phenomena are not truly existent, that they don't have any sort of intrinsic or real existence by way of their own nature. And then there is the third turning of the wheel, and this is again according to the Sutra Unraveling the Thought, and the Sutra Unraveling the Thought goes in the third turning of the wheel, where a distinction is made between those objects that are really truly established and those that are not. And so in this way, the various teachings of the Buddha, the various turnings of the wheel, are in accordance with the needs, the dispositions of disciples, teaching to them in a way that will be able to lead them.
오야 근데 인상 다 장애가 또 단다 콜로스를 잖아 아니 다 장애가 저 자니 콜로스도 장된당 애든도 제수되라 장의기도 공반제와양 공반제되라 콜로스보라 파자와되지나 콜로스보데 중지 공반 제수되라 아니 샘점지 수지제와 어느 엄마의 수지제와 엄마의 수지제와 샘점게 수지 제지자바 아니 자와라니 그 루온 땜바게 아니 토메기 아니 또데 가서를 또데 탐본이 찬된다 콜로 파파다 탐본이 찬된다 아니 탐망에 된도 도시 심심수도 제지자바 우미수도 제지가 아니다 고물루루지 제수다네 와 고물루루기 아니 자와라니 그 롱덴베다 루루기 제수다네 아니 또데 통단이 오다 토마다 타만이 오다 찬된다 안 파방 어디도 도제 인장等的成立国有广播节目样本地的使用的这民间把是吧这个民间呗我的你多的我的你多有广播节目我的有广播节目现在我的你多有广播节目了你今天这让你去弄点吧我今天这让你去弄点吧去点吧当然是他等等的我没出的节目了今天这让你去弄点吧他录住소저 비디 유도니 결론반대 세자와 김민루시 배바디 마이 티바 지된도 라메 티제 라잖아 그러니까 김대는 양알에 로주자 려바나 그러와 소저 비디 유도니 결론반대 세자와 김민루시 배바디 마이 지된 담바 지된도 라도 네 장의 채나라도 가회사들 대화전도 태조 세가라 좀nen데 랑기 루루기 어느 미치도 공부되와 롱된바다 아니 토미지지 결론이 대제팀이 된라게 도된 거된 참여진 남바망보라도지 지대 리포트한다니 쇼지 리포트다니 소 되게 sem단 수도 제와데 아니 공부 가서 좀 되더라니 그 롱된바 현상 올린 담배게 아니 신대 소치니 루루다 토미니 두사야 두심바래 야
So here, as far as the sort of explaining, commenting on what are definitive scriptures and which are those that require interpretation, there are different methods of explanation, sort of commentary that come out from this. So not every ancient sage was capable of clarifying the true meaning of the definitive and those scriptures which require interpretation. So here, the mind-only school has their own method of sort of parsing the various turnings of the wheel and classifying those. So they follow after the sort of commentary or what appears in the Sutra Unraveling the Thought, and they explain that the first two turnings of the wheel require interpretation. So the first turnings that dealt with like the Four Noble Truths, and the next dealing with the perfection of wisdom and so forth. And then the third turning of the wheel, which includes this sutra Unraveling the Thought, they take to be definitive. And so that's how they classify their sort of commentarial tradition. Now, for commenting on the true intent of the definitive, it took the savior Nagarjuna, as foretold by the Buddhas themselves. So the Buddha actually prophesied that Nagarjuna would come and correctly comment on the view of the middle way. And so there are scripture passages, I can't get the exact quotation, but the Sutra of the Descent into Lanka has a passage describing Nagarjuna and prophesizing that he will come and correctly clarify what is definitive and what what requires interpretation. So following after Nagarjuna, and this is following the mode of classifying the three turnings of the wheel as it appears in the Sutra Unraveling the Thought, but the first turning of the wheel requires interpretation. These scriptures cannot be taken as definitive, and this is according to Nagarjuna. And then the second turning of the wheel are definitive sutras for the most part, and then the third turning of the wheel requires requires interpretation. So including the sutra Unraveling the Thought that actually presents these three wheels, those are considered to require interpretation. So the Buddha himself prophesied that Nagarjuna would come, that he would be born in the south, and he would properly explain the way of understanding the scriptures. So here, Nagarjuna did this. He elucidated the proper intent of the Buddhas through the root wisdom and other works in his famed collection on reasoning of the middle way, basing them on the scripture known as Understanding That Has No End. So Nagarjuna, in his collection of scriptures that deal with the middle way, properly clarified the intent of the Buddha regarding which scriptures were to be taken as definitive and which were those that required interpretation.
Oh yeah. Satini kasore luruki ani jawarani ki lung tempe ki ani luruki ngeden ji kwamba dewa sare ngeden do ani da gelin disum ko kwamba de sama da gelin disum kwamba de sama ngeden ji kwamba dewa jawarani ji lung tempe kwamba luruki 아니 너데 가르를 때네 아니 가르를 세레서나 공부되어래서나 아니 로드 메세바 로드 메세베다 돌아 때네 아니 견딘도 숨기 공부 아니 가서래 아니 순한 남자 유바지 최다자랑 심매바 땜바기 아니 견딘도 숨기 공부돼 로 자와 시라오기 아니 우마르도 출라 소비 권에 아니 의대지 삼미다와 아니 배 가서래 토마소 챙겨야 다 루르크소 쳐쳐야 임바리 아마 제유 공부 가서래 의대지 삼미다위자 다와데 점된데 이코로 아니 견디도스는 순반 나신 소 토마소 챙겨야 루르이자 루르라 오마웨르 루지 오마웨 신대 소쳐봐 대우루르그 오마웨 신대 소쳐는 티지수 신대 소 정근데라 아니다 산제장 지지수 레베 산제장지 아니 대원 불라 부터 빨리 다다 산제장지 두번 받아 파 아니 파발에 다 등을 전에 내가 파발에 벌 파발에 오마 시켜왔다 아니 로벤 나와 잡에 아니 루리지 공부 아니 자시 저와 식사당 아니 자시 그 텐제 오만 주발라 소와제 가나 아니 루리지 공부 다른 바 신도 사모 탄주를 제 따와 땡라 베게 아니 자가 그베 슌다 루루게 대신데 소치와체 하마남지 제베 단지 아니 신데 소지니 아니 순한 남자가 바지 최탐자 랑시지 마주 바당 랑시지 마주 장 타녀도 아니 자체 탐제 태바게 아니 소데도 스마치 아임바레
So here, Nagarjuna was prophesied by the Buddha, and he was able to elucidate the actual intention of the Buddha according to this sutra of, I believe that the person who asked for the sutra is the English translation of their name would be Inexhaustible Wisdom. And so following after this, he was able to produce a commentarial tradition, or literally it's like open the chariot way of the proper understanding that the intention of the Buddha, the final intention, was that all phenomena lack any kind of intrinsic existence, and the sutras dealing with the perfection of wisdom are to be taken as definitive. And so he was able to clarify this, open this pathway for others to properly understand the intention of the Buddha. And so he was able to introduce or sort of open the way for an entire system clarifying the definitive and the profound view just as the victorious Buddhas intended it. And he did this by by writing his texts, including the root verses on wisdom and other works in his famed collection of reasoning on the middle way. So there are numerous texts that fall into that. And this is based on this scripture, like understanding that has no end, but that's actually the name of somebody who requested the sutra. So it's like inexhaustible wisdom. This is the name of the sutra. And so following after him, later on, came the masters Buddhapalita, who composed a commentary by the same name, so it's actually called Buddhapalita, and Aryadeva, who composed the 400 verses on the middle way and other titles. And actually Aryadeva was before Buddhapalita, so maybe those should be switched. And then most especially, there was the master Chandrakirti, who, following the intent of the realized being Nagarjuna, wrote various works, including Sisal, or clarification of the words, explaining root wisdom, and entry to the middle way, and so forth. So Chandrakirti and Buddhapalita and Aryadeva follow after this path that Nagarjuna had opened up, wherein it is established, it is understood that phenomena are not established by way of some kind of intrinsic nature or characteristic. They lack that sort of intrinsic establishment, but at the same time, conventional phenomena, these cause and effect is still tenable, is still like logically posited in the face of the fact that all phenomena lack intrinsic existence, but is still able to posit on a conventional level the functionality of cause and effect. So this was the unique sort of contribution of Nagarjuna.
Oh yeah. 아니 다 우마위신데 소제바볼라 아니 루주체 저 우마위신 다 되는마 제외가라다 아니 가서 우마와텔라야 아니 우마란주바다 탄주와 니베나네 아니 탄주 타지 란주 메데바게 소 챙겐데 아니 오 관이 쇼레 산나다 세바카지게 산제잔네 마시게요 와 아니 지당 아니 가서래 가서 최탐제라신 소 토마 챙겐지 아니 가란지 메베 소 챙겐지 산제잔네인데 산제잔네 마 챙겐 산제잔게 제라 아니 나와 잡아게 아니 가서래 탄주타제 란주 메테바게 아니 소지 챙겐데 나와이다 다와 잡아인자 탄주비 신데 소체버들라 아니 다와 다시 다와 잡아샤고래 탄주태지 주제 메대바지 다위숑젠장 단제바 멤버네 마숑웨 세니탈레 신이부가스 장레 신이부가스 사도와 인장 그와가지 요데 다위숑 젠장네 제바 멤버네 마숑웨 산다와 샤바데 아니 탄주태지랑 좀 메대바게 신데 소체가 탄주비 신데 소체라 안 다와 잡아샤야
네, 상계경
소제现在有的是吧？托马确诊这样心里面把托马所应该的三节讲给写了的，要看清楚的。
Okay, so here then Nagarjuna opened the sort of middle way, and following after him was Buddhapalita, who apparently sort of opened the way of things not of a lack of inherent existence of phenomena. He opened up that pathway, and then so following after him is Master Chandrakirti, who sort of opened up the way of the Prasangikas. Although he didn't like invent that pathway, he opened that up for others to follow after. So there is following after Nagarjuna, who sort of opened this middle way. There were those who established or opened the way for the autonomous school, or the Svatantrikas, the middle way autonomy school, and Buddhapalita, and then Chandrakirti following after him. Chandrakirti sort of opened the pathway for the Prasangikas, or the consequentialist school. So these are the sort of the lineage that follows after Nagarjuna.
No, Rashimi Biso Toma de Sanje Jang Chewari, Inza Chewa, Inza Sanje Jang, Ani Tanju Sinde Soji Shingan Yuari. Ranju Miteba, Tang Tanju Tebagi, and the So Shingan de Dawachaba. Ranju Sena Kansila Sigore, Sena, Rangun the Tribu Susum Gitar. Nala Dene, and Jujato Jabacheva, the Gangade Ranjuba to go or Ranju Setiri, Rangon to be Susubatale, and a Jujato Jabachevati, and it Dakasore, Ranju Tigore, needed Tanju Leo Marawa, Rangon to be Susun Marawa. Yizang Ranju made that. Tanju Tabagi, any castle Saga Dene, Shingan, the Tawashaba Yizang. The issue general Java, and the Thomas Ochewa is listening for so in the Sinde Soja, any Jibu Mashaba, Sanja Mashaba, Tanju, Sinde Soja, Tanju, Sanja Mashaba, Tawachabasha, to the Diri.
Okay. So here then, as we're talking about these various sort of philosophical schools that are opened up by various masters. So following after Nagarjuna, there were other masters. So Buddhapalita expounded the lack of intrinsic existence of phenomena, and some want to posit him as being the sort of one who opened the way of the Prasangika, or the consequentialist tradition, in sort of opposition to those that we call autonomists. And the reason that they are called autonomists is because they believe in autonomous signs that are established from their own side, that are the Susungi Drupa, how would you say, like established by the three? Is Susungi Drupa? Okay, so there's the autonomous. I'm sorry, my deficiencies of understanding. But so there are those that would assert that there are these autonomous signs that have existence from their own side, that can be posited as sort of having autonomy in terms of a logical sign. Now, it was Chandrakirti who, in opposition to that, posited the validity of a consequence as being a means of realizing a point. And so because it was Chandrakirti who sort of posited that consequences alone have enough force to them to bring about realization, he is considered to be the one who opened the way for the consequentialists, although it is the case that Buddhapalita preceded him and also held the same kind of views, because of Chandrakirti's explicitly talking about consequences and the validity of consequences, that he's considered to be the opener of the way of the consequentialists. Does that?
Oh yeah. Didn't that Tommy do the Gondela then? Ani do the Tamboni, Chandendang, Tamang didn't do the Gondela then. And it is, and then there was seen their so chenny. And you saw Jira get danger de la, I said, Sadanga. O Domnabani, O Tishagore, and you told me which is in, and Papa Namdode, and Jumba Trodella, Pasondilla, Jumba Trode, and you think it's some so and it's something to Shagore.
Samsambagi Tawa.
Samsung to Shagore.
So then the opener of the way of the mind only is Sangha, who, based upon the sutra unraveling the thought, then posits that the first two turnings of the wheel, so the first turning and the second turning, are requiring interpretation, and that this third turning of the wheel, primarily the sutra unraveling the thought, is to be considered definitive. And so Sangha and those who followed after him, including Vasubandhu and other Master Singye Sangpo, follow after this mind-only sort of way of positing what is definitive and what requires interpretation.
Oh yeah. Delice, Tatini, Tetago Comba, Sikala Yageta, Ukasore, Sanjani Jabba, Buddha Paletang, and it's Ludukabe Tashi, Risotu, and it's Sanjani Tabe, Buddha Paletang, Powerless Shijava. And it's a hit of what says Umajubala, so what Tetago Comba Chiji Maloba, Tree, Chamachusa Meba. 그 강전지 존재 사원 대법원이 아니 장고나마 정가와 첨부 마저 현수야 마주외 아니 장고나마 정가와 자시 저바 자시 아니 자시 직전당 오야 아니 다 우만주바 공바 아니 다 제대라 식사당 우다 우만주비 공바 전제라 우만 공바라 살아서 마자니 아니 다 사와 자바 인상 수양 마주외 랑자남 파바에 랑자남 파바 루루지 루상 이제 탐제 챔비 레세 메도주비 신청보 남라 다 땡고 그래 스텔라 때네 아니 파바에서 공바 쳐고 그래 세로 고해와인데 주바그 가서 레벨루루 잡지 람라니 치료줄에 시위 탐매도 사다 루루그 로산데라 마르바 텔레 현도 주와 치료도 주와데라 아니 가서를 동안여와를 시바그 탈바토가 그 탐매봐 치료질에 시위 탐매도 어딘지 되니 가서 나시 대다 군도 되니 대라냠 텔레 시험바나 군도당 안에 된다밖에 된 대마샤밖에 아니 되니 그 텔레냠바 되니 그 된다 좀 메셔봐 아니 냠지 잡아 텔레냠바라 아니 타바주밖에 된다는데 좀 메셔나 타바주밖에 탐매봐 텔레냠바 타바주에 메셔당 야
So then, based upon these authoritative texts, so Nagarjuna's root verses on wisdom, as well as his other the six texts that deal with the reasoning of the middle way, and then those who followed after, Buddhapalita with his commentary entitled Buddhapalita, as well as Aryadeva and his 400 verses on the middle way, and then this was followed by Chandrakirti, who wrote the clarification of the words, or clear words, as well as entry to the middle way. And then here in the land of snows, it says, in Tibet, it was the gentle protector Tsongkhapa, and no one else but him, who was able to elucidate the true meaning of these works with absolute accuracy, without the slightest taint of error. So Jelama Tsongkhapa wrote a great commentary on Nagarjuna's root verses on wisdom, as well as the illumination of the thought, commentary on the entry to the middle way. And so this is the sort of system that one needs to follow after, this proper interpretation. So it says then, thus you and I should follow the excellent system of that highest of realized beings, Nagarjuna, and his spiritual sons. We should rely on the great textbooks of the omniscient Lord Tsongkhapa, on his high and wondrous words. So here it then quotes from the entry to the middle way. There's no way to peace for people who have stepped from the path of the system taught by Master Nagarjuna. They've lost the truths, the conventional and the real. Those who've lost the truths cannot be free. So here it is explaining that there is, as we read yesterday, a passage where it said that there is no second door to peace. So there is no other means other than a correct understanding of the two truths, the conventional and ultimate truth, and then understanding properly how to come to a realization of the ultimate truth that leads one to freedom, that leads one to peace. So outside of this system, which has been elucidated by Nagarjuna and his followers, there's no way to gain a correct understanding of the two truths, and in particular the ultimate truth. So anyone who strays from that, who doesn't come to a proper understanding of the two truths, and is strayed from this system, and there is no way for them to gain peace.
Oh yeah. That Shedang, any church and Lamjan Kasuyang. Ani tawa lurukiloma tawa tabane jubadi zang ani luruloma datayin tele jibi mengaki chini demba toba tele jubagi ani sunan namje gabachi che tamje rashi meba tangla babagi rashi mebagi ani tombani ro tombani chini ani tangla pade ani chini demba to chini demba onsum de to son gomba chawala tena ta toba 정고 인자 루루로만 따라이 텔레지베 맹하게 친이 좀 떠봐 주로 제간다 루루에서 그치서 장고 그래.
As well, the matchless Lord Atisha has said, in terms of how one is able to recognize emptiness, Nagarjuna, who was prophesied by the Tathagata and who perceived the truth of ultimate reality, had a disciple named Chandrakirti, and the truth of ultimate reality can be realized through these instructions handed down through them. So it is by the proper instructions from Nagarjuna and his student Chandrakirti that we are able to come to an understanding of what it means to lack this kind of intrinsic existence, what intrinsic existence is and what the lack of that looks like. So it is by these proper teachings that one is able to come to a proper determination about the meaning of emptiness, which then is able to bring you to the seeing of reality or seeing of the truth.
Tena sami tawandi donganiga la meta mebayin dodang nganiga la ane samo donbanji tomato belo de me dongagi negala ane sawa donbanji to belo dang jaje wa lai koloni sunde je yo kona liango wa yinzang ane de dong ge dong ba se ge de dong ni su me bi xie se ge dong ba de la ka sa ge da me dang de wa je we dong ba ji de dong je de me ha yin ba de ka sa da me ra ba dang da de ni sun ji ni dong ge dong ba dan ja ni de dong ja wa ge zo wa de dong ja wa zhen mi ye ba yin ba de是吧都de yin zang da de dong ja wa zhen mi ye jiang zuo rin 동반이 조림 좀 타바자 맞아 조림 고마 타바 쳐발라 아니 유 동반이 란지비 동바다 자와당 순진이 동그 동바다 자와장 여장 대다그 조림 타바자 마도 아니 가소래 랑 고마 좀미도 바쳐 공부할 때나 고마 좀미도 바인장 람 고마 정겐데라 아니 탄주가 따와 투모만이 바꿔와 인장 대나 삼이 따와데 동안이가라 동안이가 라라데네 아니 수주고 고만 잡아 쳐봐라 메다메바인
아니 랑규베기 타war라
랑규베 따와
좀이 뽑아요래
저는 쳐봤잖아요 와래 선생님 따와라 저는 쳐봤잖아요 와래 따와다 자와라
So here then it continues saying that you can see then that this profound viewpoint on things is indispensable for both the open and the secret teachings. And so here we need to have the correct view for both the sutra kind of teachings as well as once one gets into Vajrayana, you need to have this union of wisdom and method. One isn't able to proceed without having wisdom and method combined. So there's a need to train in both the vast past activities as well as the profound view to be able to engage in the teachings of Vajrayana. Now, in Vajrayana, this wisdom, this union of wisdom and method is often referred to as bliss and emptiness. And in order to get to the highest kind of realizations, one absolutely needs to have the consequentialist view, this prasangika view, in order to be able to fully complete the path. Now, it's said that if one had, for example, a mind-only kind of view or understanding of emptiness, or an autonomous school view of emptiness, one would be able to attain the path of completion, the completion stage, but you couldn't move on past that. So if you had a more sort of coarse realization of the selflessness of persons or the selflessness of phenomena, one would be able to get to the stage, to the completion stage, but you couldn't proceed beyond that without having the proper prasangika or this consequentialist view of emptiness. One wouldn't be able to traverse beyond that.
Oh yeah. Samita was the tongue and you got a method by instant. They don't judge you, and then that was someone to Tametana by a then, and then a Pabchi Tametela, Nidela Pabsutela, and then Abe Chutashi. Jaga Pabe to Chutama was Shichumala, Cheramawata, Dodewata, Simzabata, Umawa, Cheni, she said. Umawa, she said, Kana. The Nita. Kita jaga pabi jum si chunga la rande cherama tela dewa job jesi ta di nane cherama nema puwa se de cherama nema puwa gi dewa degi ani kaso de rande tu be ranje tu be ta mi da kan do yan je tu me be ranje tu be yo ke yan ba yin zang ligi ni 确他们家断线打没把是看上还是修完那些，哪怕三节个出不得劲，听见了，确他们家断线打没把，对接他们家没得把，三节他们家动啊吧，确他们家断线打没把，两个人的吧，希望在那个大瓦疙瘩去恰恰去开两个的话，大瓦开上恰恰去开了吧，人家确他们家断线打没把，谁的打没得了，看着说的，他那都一切。 Ranjiba mention个对的了，那就让王家个动画当，人家对不在一个动画去个你切，哇，那人家告诉的，大致让王家去动画的，你。 nema pubi dewa ki dogu are rewa chira nema pubi taji rawa jeje tobe gacha de date gacha dewa re rewa jujela ma de rawa wa tab den tabe to ma jujela ma chashela ma de juba jibu wa sai kala o tigi ani den du me jibe taba to ma jujela ma de rawa to ma chashela ma de jibu ye to wa sai ge daji rawa jeje to ba de date gacha de ni ti da me kai len ba yin zang ani da ka so da me kai len nema chuwa ki dame kai lemba da me lemba songa ni ranja tu bi zayu ki da kai wa yin ba len zan dame kai me lemba joya yo wa de ta kan je de si mo ga che o nema pu de wa da je ran je je dong le da de ga cha de de ranja tu bi zayu ki dong wa de dame de kai len ga ranja tu bi zayu ki 这有个大的嘎cha没对吧？大没的看对呀，绝对没被人家话开两把印章，这个人家对面这有个单位，他们没对把印章，你说下过来的嘞，其实那么不远，大家让我讲起大的嘎cha对是我说，
So here, when we are coming to an understanding of emptiness, we go through a process of determining what the meaning of emptiness is, to coming to a resolution with respect to that. And so there are different philosophical schools of Buddhist thought that emerged in order to explain how one comes to determine emptiness. And so I'm going to be significantly changing some of these names that he's using here, just as a heads up. The the first of these is, so we have four general tenant schools, philosophical different schools. And so the first, I'm going to use the word great expositionist instead of detailist. And the second is the sutra school instead of the scripturalist school. And then I'll go with mind only. And then you have the middle way schools, which are divided into, he calls them independent and implication. I'll be using autonomist and consequentialist. Those are the terms I'm more familiar with. So here, the first of these schools, the Great Exposition School, has 18 sub-schools within it. One of these is called the Vatsiputriya section. And so here there is some debate as to whether they fall into being a Buddhist philosophical school or whether they are not a Buddhist philosophical school. So some say that because they negate a self, sorry, back up. There are these four seals of Buddhist thought, as we went through earlier. And so in order to be a Buddhist philosophical school, you have to accept all of these, that compounded phenomena are impermanent, contaminated phenomena are in the nature of suffering, all phenomena are empty and selfless, and nirvana is peace. So those are the sort of basic premises that one has to accept to be considered a Buddhist. And so here, the Vatsiputriya school, they deny or they negate a self which is unchanging, singular, and independent, or you could say permanent, unitary, and autonomous. So although they negate or refute that type of self, they do accept a kind of self that is a substantially existent, self-sufficient entity, that is something that is inexpressible. And so there are some that would say that no, they are not Buddhists because they accept that kind of a self. But others would say, well, since they negate this permanent, unitary, and autonomous self, they do get to be considered a Buddhist school. So the object of negation, which they assert, or which they are refuting, is some kind of a self which is unchanging, so that wouldn't have to rely upon any kind of causes or conditions, that is singular in terms of not having any sort of parts to it, not being able to distinguish parts and whole, and something that is independent, that would be able to set itself up from its own side. So that kind of a self they deny or they refute, whereas there are sort of more subtle types of self that are refuted as one goes along through these different tenet schools.
Oh.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Did I forget anything really important in that? Did I think I got it. Okay. Jeez.
Oh, yeah. 一张大自然解释他说什么？电动煤气被打败断了。你确他们这各级对接他们各级几百人在电动煤气被打败断了，举荐了嘛对不？让往外断了。拆线了嘛对不？就不会断了，所以我大致让往前去断了是得习惯的，是吧？
No. So here, a self that would be permanent, unitary, and autonomous. The fact that that things are disintegrating moment to moment, changing, refutes the possibility of there being some kind of permanence or eternal nature to this self. And then the fact of relying upon causes and conditions refutes or negates the possibility of having an independent, autonomous sort of a self. And then the fact that things have parts, that the whole is made up of parts, would sort of negate or refute the singularity, having a unitary kind of a self.
Oh yeah, that is what just tell you. That day, Chirama was Shandang, Senama with the Mayan Chirama was Shandang. That Dote Wadang, Kasak Dami Dodala Dote Wadang, and it's Samson Badang, Ranji Bashiga, and the Kasak Dami Dodan did you but regulate. 是吧？其他嘛，我相当多的外，人家对为这都出来的感觉是速度啊，你带着究竟没做3个多，多的其他嘛，我相当多的外，看啥人家对为这都出来的感觉对吧？人家对为这都出来感觉切个嘛，人家对为这都出来要的，是吧？人家对为这都出来的要钱。看啥人家对比这都没出过钱的啊！
你吃了有的，看啥了有吗？吃的，
看是
吃的，人家对吧？这
吃什么的就没的，其他嘛我相当多的人家对比这都出来的感觉对速度啊，人家其他嘛我相当多的给看啥人家对比这都出来的感觉对吧钱，是吧？其他人家对比这都出来的感觉没得吧的，这切为呢？其他人家对比这都出来的要的。
no，
是吧？兄弟大概团出呢，还是这有的人家对不对？团就把那我写的，但的团就我马多瓦的是个的，团就我马多瓦的多的瓦当，啊你3把当，我们让就不留给，咱们叫做明着7、8秒钱。当我做出明着为7、8秒给打，俺那别人是看啥都有顶多，人家对不对？就出来的感觉得过的，
So here then there is that the members of this one particular sub-school of the Great Exposition School assert that the object of negation is any self which is unchanging and singular and independent. But all of the other sub-schools of the Great Exposition School, as well as those of the Sutra School, and actually through the Mind Only and the Autonomy School, assert as the object of negation of the self of persons to be any self which is something a substantially existent self in the sense of being able to set itself up. So here I usually translate this as a self which is established as a self-sufficient substantial entity. So here those members of the Great Exposition School, as well as those of the Sutra School, it says in the text that seek to deny something, but it actually needs to be seek to deny a person that can stand on its own, something which exists in a substantial way. Because in general, the members of this Great Exposition School, as well as the Sutra School, would accept self-sufficient, substantial existence for entities other than the person. So for them, what they are refuting or denying is a person that can stand on its own, something which exists in a substantial way. And everyone below the consequentialist school also accepts this as being a kind of selflessness, for the self of the person to lack this sort of substantial, self-sufficient existence is accepted all the way up through the middle way autonomy school as being a kind of selflessness of the person.
Oh yeah. 가서 그래, 지나면 와시한다. 너대와 란자 두비 자유도 출발돼 세대 된다. 가사 란자 두비 자유도 출발돼 가자 되와체. 현지당 자유 시간대 당 란자 두비 자유 전체 체제. 최신 생활을 맞대봐 송도 매진. 간지아루데 텔레샴바달라 미데지 텔레샴바달라 미데바스다 요한다 너디나 최신 생활을 맞대봐 송도 예바데 아니 자유당 최전 송화라 마대바 아니 송도 매바데 다요 전에 자다가 제바 도착을 하래 그러와 이상 라제도베 자유요 와체 가사 라제도베 자유도 주바데 다 가자인
So here again, where it's saying that members of this Great Exposition School, as well as those of the Sutra School, are denying it's a person that can stand on its own, something that is a self-sufficient, substantial entity. In general, they do accept that kind of self-sufficiency, that kind of existence is acceptable for phenomena other than the person. But here, they are their object of negation is a person that could stand on its own. A person that is a self-sufficient, substantial entity is the object that is being negated here for those that are of the Great Exposition and the Sutra school.
Oh yeah. 나한테 가르치래서나 아니다. 라데 티바치 그 주다마와 현재 따나 가사게 다면이 아니 현이 가서 가사게 다면이 라데 티바치 그 주다마와 현재 따나 가사 풍보다 천이 믿음이 재수며 받잖아 돼도 가사다 풍보니오데 천이 믿음 봐 오늘 재수며 받잖아 돼도 다들 가르친 거래서 가서래 나가 망아디 아니 가사디 아니 풍보남 셴라 풍보라 소와는 셴라라 말해봐 셴라 마덴바라 왕주제를 셴라라 말해봐 주바디 더 가사가 달라체 와 아니 왕주제 대체밀로데 아니 가서래 가사가 단테나 하셔더라 가사가 남면이 가대 터버지운 것도 하나 뒤에는 나한테 풍보디 지웠다고다 풍보나 뒤고 코다고 진데 나이셔 진비치리시 가라 가르송 거래서나 아니 나한테 아유 풍보라 소와 셴라라 말해봐 뭐 셴라 마다 말 아니 마덴바 아니 가사데 가소래 가사데 풍보라 왕주자 전바데 가사가 단진
No. 디 샘삼바기 갑수. 샘삼바기 갑수. 샘삼바기.
지바 샘삼바 란지바. 아니 지바리 탄주가 많이 만져봐 많이 바기.
What did I forget from the last? 디 제유당 당일기 튼다 가르레스 제유 게 제유
맞아
튼다 가르레스
그때 가사라게 되게 제유
디 제셰 나로나 디 제유기 튼다
제유세 다준인바 제유세다 최先送完了马德巴送的也把在是吧최先路的送完了马德巴送的也把在최先路的马德巴送的没把的大别那康萨的康萨路的送完了澎湖路的送完了对吧的是吧澎湖路的马德巴康萨路的送完要嘛的你这康萨大于澎湖在풍보로도 somebody 풍보래 셔체 현지로 와서 좀 되고 말에 대해서 제
No. I'm having a lot of trouble. So substantial existence versus like imputed existence, but I'm really having trouble understanding. No. Okay. Okay, so here, this is getting at what is the meaning of substantial existence versus something that is designatedly existent. So here, if one can't have sort of like an appearance of the person, the I, without the aggregate, so that is something that is designated. There's no sort of self apart from the aggregates. One has to have the appearance of of the aggregates to have a sense of the self, and so that's designated then. But in order to, the aggregates are seen as substantially existent because they don't have to rely upon, like, seeing some.
Oh yeah.
No. So here, where it's talking about this self, which is, I'm sorry for my lack of understanding, a self which is self-sufficient and substantially existent, this is a kind of self that doesn't have to rely upon anything else. This substantial existence is like thinking, so for all of the schools below the consequentialist school, the autonomy school, the mind only, as well as the Great Exposition and the Sutra school, when they are refuting a self which is self-sufficient and substantially existent, this is the refutation of a self that is somehow not reliant upon the aggregates, that doesn't have to depend or isn't contingent upon them, as if it were able to like be in control of the aggregates and be the one like working them, controlling them, as if there were some sort of existence of this self that wasn't dependent upon those aggregates, that were independent or able to set itself up from outside of that. So this kind of a self is what is refuted when these schools refute a self which is substantially existent, which is self-sufficient and substantially existent.
Oh yeah, 다원은 두세다. 다데 아니 지웠다고다. 풍부대 코다고 지웠다고 쯤바세. 나한테 풍부라 왕주어보다. 라와미 다데 풍부라 왕주어보다. 풍부대 왕주자. 왕주자 쯤바. 是吧？然后我们大的那卡说的，通过了王局家这一个呢，那王局不当王局家牛的，我先都真把起，我先都真把起当，王局不当王局家牛的，我先都没啥，王局不真把赢把了，我先都没把。我现在没怎么，王主不的结不得个，俺那活的了，王主记得干了，我现在怎么，对了别了，俺那得说的，是吧？出这个出了王主怎么的？俺那出了我他的都要吧是吧？是吧？出去的去了王主我的，然后问他的出去去了王主怎么的？成绩没得把人家为先都怎么的钱？创办，俺你创办了王主真干的，我还是现在没怎么的，是吧？现在没怎么，创办扩展也创办这吧？我创办来先创办去。没有印象，创办了王主这样就通过的成绩没对先都怎么的钱？我在这都主要的干下去，我们的当心两节去，起码的男子滚蛋。
唐伯的
当真两节。
What?
好过么事？王主不当王主家牛的，王主不了王主家的先都真爱的，出了王主的这个了，出来先出老是要让我太太要的吧，是吧？出来先出去王主弄我要的，出去好过了。
What is?
这你写的清楚的。
I'm just not getting where the innate and the artificial, where the difference is on that.
是吧？我到我呢。
So, here, this kind of self that is...
추지로와
No,
추천경의 초조라
no,
추지디 추래我现在有了吧
No.
我现在让除了忘记我不听过了吧
No.
天南星大的然后大的碰破了忘记我听的忘记我钱是吧忘记这个这些证据去人长我现在也把没证给去现在没证给去这现在证给的现在没证给你这现在证给的钱是吧从不了忘记就看这个了从不了先比从不就要的是用嘛的话是吧我等我现在没证给的钱忘记这真把了我现在真把他现在没这把你要把人长他因为现在一个大多数真把自己把几把人把了你跟他的现在小堂都下过的碰过的参与没对吧真实的对了他看见碰过的参与没对吧人家真实的
So I'm sorry that I'm struggling with this. Here there are two different sort of ways of apprehending this self as being something that is a self-sufficient, substantial entity. So if one is grasping at this self as that which has control over the aggregates, which controls and sort of directs the aggregates. If one sees them as being the aggregates and this self, which is somehow controlling them or directing them, if one sees them as having a different sort of nature, of being of a different essence. So the example of this is like a cow herder that is directing the cows. Those things are of a different kind of nature. So you have these aggregates that are then being directed or controlled by a self that is of a different essence. So this is one way of grasping at a self as being a self-sufficient, substantial entity, and that is an entity that is different, has a different essence from the aggregates which it is controlling, in the way that a herdsman and the cows are, the herdsman is directing them and so forth, but has a different kind of entity, different nature from them. And then the other example would be where you don't see these two, the self which is directing the aggregates or controlling them as having a completely different nature. So this is like a businessman? Is that what you...
Yeah.
A merchant?
Sometimes they say the head salesman and the team salesman.
Yeah, so where you have a situation where you have sales, I guess, going on, and you don't see a sort of difference in entity or nature between I don't know, it's a really hard example for me to understand, between the one that's doing the control. So if we go back to the aggregates and this self, which is seen to be the one directing or controlling the aggregates, in this second type of grasping, one wouldn't see those two as being of a completely different nature, but rather that there's sort of this part of that is controlling what's happening, but they're not totally separate or of a completely different nature.
Oh yeah, that one. Pumbola madam, pumbola mal, one ramara we rawi tade. Taranja to be that did jela and roll of chair, and it's around some of them to the Chuakushumare. 아니 다샘점배 중진 대신이 주와서 다치 대신 주와디 가짜되어서 좋아 중진 대신도 주와디 아니 가짜되어서 가래를 수단 수준비 참만이 오디 대신만 봐. 다 노대와기 수단 수준비 참만이 오디 대신 수디 아니 수를 때는 순진 미시기니 순지 미지데 아니 가서 수리 순지 미시 미견주 그단 대보라 제타다 고와 인장 아니 순지 미시데 아니 유수 미견 차와라 때나 개바 인장 아니 수다 순지 민지 요제 제타다 주바리 태양 아니 수태양 간디지를 살가나 토마스우디 두대 참에 싸네 두대 참에 싸네 아니 수라바주와 되게 미견체체네 아니 순지 미시디 개와 이자 시로 텐도 주바지 개len 거 같아
So then, as far as the mind-only school, they say that what we come to realize does not exist is any case where where the subject that holds an object and the object which it holds are made from any different substance, or they say that the sort of object that we are trying to negate is any sort of establishment of the establishment as different entities of the apprehending subject and the object that it apprehends. So for the mind-only school, they are saying that any sort of difference of substance between the apprehended object and the apprehending subject, that is what we need to realize the object of negation. Now, if we look at the Sutra school that comes before, they assert that there is a difference in substance between a perceiving subject and a perceived object. So, for example, if we see a form, that form is the cause or the condition that then leads us to have a visual perception. So the thing out there, the form, must be there separate as a substantially different entity, which then is the cause which leads us to have a visual perception. So when you have something where you have a cause and an effect, they have to be temporally different, but also substantially different here. So they would assert that there are partless particles, these tiny subtle atoms, we could say, that then the conglomeration of those atoms comes to be an external form, which is then established as substantially different from our perceiving consciousness, wherein it can act as a cause for our perception of something. So according to the Sutra school, then, there are externally established objects, and those objects can then act as causes for our perception.
Oh yeah. 아니 다 센서바기 아니 치료된도 좋아돼 모두 봐 인상 아니 치료된 바 까니 아니 가서래 수시에 단위도 되네 시외 단위 수다 수지 참만이 오데 자치가 개봐 수다 수지 참만이 오데 니네 파자질라 대봐 그것이 땡기 아니 수나제기 아니 파자질래 그것이 땡기 아니 파자지 순지 미세기 쳤지라 뭐지 아니 파자지 아니 나가 사가 수경 오주디 수다 순지 미세기 오데 니네 파자질라 대봐 이자제 자치 그거래 자치
So according to the mind-only school, there are no external objects then. There are no external objects that are of a different nature from our consciousness. So all that we perceive is in the nature of consciousness. We don't have it, there aren't any sort of externally established objects, but rather it is the case that everything arises from our sort of foundational consciousness. And from having imprints of sort of our predispositions, latencies on our consciousness which awake, which are in the nature of consciousness, this causes us to perceive external objects as if they were external objects, but in reality those are of the nature of mind. There are no externally established objects, but rather it is from these imprints, these latencies that have been laid down on our consciousness that we come to perceive as though there were external objects, but really there's nothing that's not in the nature of mind.
아니 나 시와티기당 시와티 지라 아니 유도 나위 차지당 아니 가서 시와 그런 거 어디 차지기 니샤니 유도 나라 현주의 심리 친자 와신나 세가나 유도 나라 심리 친자 와 남시 치료의 유 수지 나바 제바당 제와지당 안남 남바 대 마샤와 치료 유진 나바시 차차되라 안에 미시장 송남차 치료지 유진 나바 마샤와 안에 시위 나비 차되라 라르 차차니 어두샤고래 유진 나라 현주비 심리 치료 와시장 남시 치료지 유 수진 나바 차비때 문제 미시체 라 시와 코란 거 뭐라 유진 나바 샤 마샤비 차 아니 시와 코란 거 뭐 차를 비차잖아 아니 라르 스체네 도샤
So here, then, it's explained that according to the mind-only school, there's one part of consciousness that is the aspect of the apprehended, the aspect of the object, this external object. And then there's a part of the consciousness which is in the aspect of the apprehender, that which is apprehending the object. And so that aspect of the apprehender, they use to posit self-cognizing consciousness, the Rangrik. And so according to the mind-only school, there is when we are perceiving external objects, a portion of the consciousness that is in the aspect of the object perceived, this external object, and then there is part of it that is in the aspect of the apprehender, that which is apprehending the object.
가서는 배나 천다야게 빌라 배차네 빌기 오지당 빌기 오데 빌데 천마보라서 카규에 차지 이용 거로 와. 그봐. 최지에 빌시가 가지고 배바이나 갔을때
Pen, paintbrush.
대나 빌코란 거 오지당 빌데 천지 카규에 차지 이용 거로 와. 고마보 차위 차지 온 거로 와. 마보 차위 차지 유진 나바디체 빌코란 공오이 차지 아니 시셔와 코란 거라니 그 차지체.
Yeah, no, it's the concept. It's not that I get the paintbrush, yeah. So when one, for example, is perceiving a paintbrush, there is a part, the paintbrush part of it is actually the oh God. Okay, so the paintbrush is like the analogy for how we see things. So the paintbrush is like the part of our consciousness that is the perceiver, that is apprehending external objects. And like the red of that is then like the external object that we perceive as being external to the consciousness.
Oh, yeah. 다들 선전비 루지 아니 추den샤지장 추den샤지 미샤바체 아니 수단 선지 참아니고데 아니 가서래 제지인바 아니 수시에 단위도 줘봐
No, so here then the mind-only school is saying that there is no sort of subject that is different in substance from the object, that all external objects that we perceive as being external objects are actually in the nature of mind. So there is no sort of substantial difference between subject and object.
Oh yeah, that didn't 이제라 선전바그 쇼이 다음에 자지 세와체. 순전히 이런 게 가사 그 다데 아니 체라마 도대가 더바 대학에 더바 나시가 가사 그 다음에 대체 디디도 쇼이 다음에 되라 순전 재생지 동바 이종 그 동바의 쇼이 다음에도 시 그봐 다테 나시 랑주바게 아니 다 가사 그 다음에 체라마에 도대가 더바 나시 가사 다음에 세바 투몽이 집바체 순전히 이런 거 쇼이 다음에 대 생각되라 랑주바 되라 아니 이 자세 도지부 마란주바다 나주지부 마란주바스 시와주 yap세 도지부 나주지부 마란주바 렌덴 재단의 법로베 렌덴 재단의 자와데 아니 도지부 마란주바 그와 디자 단 도지부 마란주바의 시대 샤지 시의 와이자 순진 이동开始그 샤지 순진 이동 제 다음에 샤지 시가 말에 시대 샤지 단 지부 가르쳐 오래 시조 예세 시와 초당 가마시를 따라 승기 3번 나서와기 아니 간데에서나 취대 샤지 메시 바인장 순진 이동기 체지 다음에 대조대 선자바다 tum바체
근데
야.
이 다음에 락바를 배.
그 다음에 라바.
So here then the mind-only school where they are asserting that the object of negation is they're negating establishment of this apprehending subject and apprehended object as being substantially different. So for them they are positing that as the selflessness of phenomena. They posit the selflessness of the person in the same way as those of the Great Exposition and the Sutra school. So the person's lack of being a self-sufficient substantial entity is the selflessness of the person for them as well. So they though posit that the selflessness of phenomena is this case where they posit as the self of phenomena that difference between subject and object, and the lack of which is then the realization of the selflessness of phenomena. Now, turning to the autonomy school of the middle way. So here there are two different types of middle way autonomy schools. There are those that follow more closely with the Sutra school proponents. So Bhava Viveka and so forth, his followers would assert that there are external objects. And then there are those followers of the middle way autonomy school that follow more closely after the mind-only school. And so those would be like Shantarakshita and his followers. And so for Bhava Viveka and those of the autonomy school following more closely after the Sutra school, as they do assert external objects, for them, they don't posit this lack of, or the person, they don't assert that this lack of duality between subject and object as being even a coarse selflessness of phenomena, because they assert external objects. So here they don't accept this lack of substantial difference between the apprehending subject and apprehended object. Now for those followers that like Shantarakshita, who do follow after more closely the mind-only school presentation, they assert this lack of duality between subject and object, or apprehending subject and apprehended object, as the coarse selflessness of phenomena. So they also accept that like the mind-only school.
Oh yeah. 다디게 순진제 가서 서로 지체. 다디제라 이런 순진 가서 최지 다음에 라바 생각 된다디 가서래. 나중에 지금 엄마랑 대체. 다더니 랑주배 너네면은 나고 왕게 샤좀 많이 봐. 유랑게 투모 많이 봐. 들려주는 추가 가자도 세순거래. 다 로네면 생각에 간데스라 시거래잖아. 로네면 생각에 랑잔 나와라 되게 만주봐. 是吧？让咱弄完了对的满足吧。看这人在那让咱下去给人吧，是吧？让就把给让咱下去给吧，让咱下去去，那种下去没些吧钱，是吧？电把出啊的，羊大把出啊的，团大把出啊没有的。 电把出没，羊大把出没，团大把出没，让我能出吧，让咱去出吧，让谁去出吧，下七个吧的， 가자라미 그와 인장 랑원의 주와 랑신이 주와 샤지 셰바 인장 아니 가자 랑원의 주와데 가자라 쇼고마 가자라 쇼고 말이 인장 다 간데에서나 치다나 그 치담제 랑원의 주와 인장 아니 랑은의 주위 나위 처럼 만주어를 만도 랑은의 주위 지라 랑은의 주와 나나 아니 주와 주고 말아와 인상 여바 강이 랑기 오 여바 되바 세나 란지바니라잖아 연나 랑은의 여바 쳐봐 연나 란자니 여바 쳐봐 쳐봐 연나 아니 랑기 나와라 랑기 오 여바 되바 란자 나와라 세나 주와 소나 아니 란자 나와라서도 추워서나 된다위 왕병에서 참아지 아니 참을 수 없어도 봐. 최대로出现이나 최대로 참아만 거와. 여바간이 랑은 오 여바 대비 루라 란자 나와라 되게 추워서나 랑기 세자 예바 좀 미니베 스타 세자 랑기 세도 막또 미니베 예밤 세자 또 발자 일단 또바다 또면지 참아 간듯이 이나양 아니 그 참아 손사데 아니 또바 참아 이나 참아 손사 해요 또면지 참아 이나 참아 손사 나요 원나요데 란데라 마주가시고 그래 송가를
So here then, the middle way autonomy school that follows after the sutra school, the one branch of that, they would assert that the coarse selflessness of phenomena then is their lack of this substantial difference between the apprehending subject and apprehended object. They would assert that to be the coarse selflessness of phenomena. So then turning to the text again, what we call the autonomy school, one part of the middle way school, believes that what we come to refute is any object that exists in some unique way of its own, rather than being established as an existent thing simply by virtue of its having appeared to an unaffected awareness. Or one could say this as the middle way autonomy school refutes establishment by way of an uncommon mode of existence, but they do assert that objects are existent by the force of appearing to a non-defective awareness. So here, what they mean by a non-defective or unaffected awareness is that when we perceive things, it is sort of a nature or character of theirs that appears to that mind, and the mind apprehends that nature or character, and it's unmistaken with respect to this appearing nature or this character of the object. So for them, they say that things have a nature or an essence. They are intrinsically existent. This is the only way that they know how to posit existence. So for them, they make a distinction between being intrinsically existent or being existent by means of its own characteristics, which are things that for things to exist at all, they must have, versus being really existent, being truly existent, or being ultimately existent, all of which they refute. They refute ultimate existence, they refute true existence, they refute this sort of real existence, which would be, again, some kind of uncommon mode of existence, which is not merely positing objects due to the force of their appearing to a non-defective awareness. So for them, all internal and external phenomenon have to have their own sort of nature or essence, which the appearing of which establishes them. So for the autonomy school, we wouldn't be able to have either conceptual or non-conceptual valid cognitions if it were not the case that objects had some sort of nature or essence, which is being apprehended by that mind, the non-defective awareness to which it appears. So for them, it is by the force of appearing to a mind in this, in an unmistaken way, which establishes the existence of things. And so for them, all phenomena are intrinsically existent, are existent by way of their own characteristics, and it is that sort of character, the appearing of which establishes the existence of an object. So whatever exists for them has to have a nature or an essence, but it is not truly or really or ultimately existent.
Oh yeah. Lo neme la ase teche, lo neme te teche. O ane toba dan tseme, toba tsema randana wala de maju wadang, maju wi toba dan ane tome tsema de lo neme te sha. Tende lo neme de wangi shaba mayimba. Ane yu korangi delu jingone chuba chi yena. delu ji chuba de ta ga cha de yi za chi da na ge chi ka de ji na do ne me la na ge wang xia ba de是吧ne wo le ne me la na ge lo ne me ti wang ge ma xia ba ge yu kha na ge tu ma ma yi delu ji de chuba ji de ta ga cha de te ga ba de rang ju bi lu ji chi ji da me cha mo
So if internal and external phenomena were to have some sort of unique mode of existence, uncommon from their own side, being set up by themselves, without having to be established by the force of appearing to a non-defective awareness, that is for them the object of negation. So this existence by way of its own sort of unique mode of being from its own side is what is being negated here, and is what constitutes the subtle selflessness of phenomena. So that things are only established by their force of appearing to a non-defective awareness, that is the way that things actually exist. If they had some sort of mode of existence, their uncommon mode of being, or some sort of existence from their own side, without having to rely upon appearing to a non-defective awareness, that self, that kind of existence, is what they are negating here, and this is what they then posit as the subtle selflessness of phenomena.
Oh yeah. Guru Rama